should Norfolk Southern be able to run a train on the American ecosystem?
Run a train, define run a train.
Oh, you know exactly what I mean. You know exactly. Hey, every one of these is exactly what it sounds like. So that's been rough, right?
So Norfolk Southern was the Ohio.
Yeah, a couple recently. Of course, with a little bit of context, we have somewhere around 100 to 200 train wrecks a year.
Oh, yeah.
In the U.S. I think the Ohio train wreck was especially special. It was basically an explosion in the middle of Ohio, and they just released a shit ton of chemicals into the air.
Yeah, they went ahead and they
made
did
a movie about it.
A controlled burn.
Yeah, they did. They prepped for that.
Yeah,
they did some field research.
Mention the movie.
Yeah. What was the name of it?
I believe it's called White Noise. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, on Netflix.
It's on my list because, sure enough, after that train wreck, I started to see all the memes about White Noise. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to watch that. And I never did.
Same situation.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah, no. There's nothing to be afraid of, guys. Stay put. You're safe. The government's going to take care of you.
Government.
Nah.
Nothing's wrong here.
Nah.
Why are we lighting it on fire? How else
Why are you asking so many damn questions?
That's right.
Now, we had the Eunice train derailment.
Yeah. That's true. That was, what, a year or two ago?
Yeah. No, that was maybe 10.
We were growing up in that area.
Yeah. So we've experienced a train derailment. I don't know if they ever... I don't think they had to light any chemicals on fire and do a burn off or anything.
No, that's Eunice, bro. They just let that seep.
We probably drank.
They was like, nobody cares about Eunice. It's fine.
Yeah. That was wild. I remember because we live, 15, 20 minutes away. And I remember pictures falling off the wall when it derailed.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
That's
it was
wild.
crazy.
Where did it happen? Because, I'd cross those tracks every day going back and forth to LSUE.
So I think it was on, what's the side road? Not 13, but the other side.
A little bit closer. Yeah, you got to eat it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there you go.
Put your whole mouth on it.
Not on 13.
Not on
but the other
13.
side. I can't remember the other road there.
Yeah, that one's more in the neighborhood area.
Yeah, by the hardware store and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that's where it was. Because I remember a few houses had to get evacuated.
So there was a lot of talk about this for the months to follow on the CCP Entertainment Network about...
That's TikTok.
That's
by the
TikTok,
way.
yeah. So we can talk about that later. But there was a lot of talk specifically about this train and other trains that were derailing every week, almost consistently for about a month, having to do with the safety standards set by a greedy corporation. Mm-hmm. That was the big talking point. Now,
along with deregulation from the Trump administration.
Sure. A lot of it had to do with overworked people, allegedly, or they cut back on the amount of, what do they call it? Is it engineers and conductors?
Yeah.
There's a certain number that they used to have. They've cut it down to 2, and that's apparently a huge strain on the system, or at least the workers that are doing it. That's one angle of it. I haven't heard much else besides that, to be honest.
And that's why they had to light it all on fire.
Well, yeah. I mean, you really have to burn it.
It makes sense.
Yeah. Burn the evidence. What? Oh, I mean, save the land.
What didn't they recategorize one of these chemicals 1 or 2 days prior to lighting this stuff on fire? If I remember, they changed the SDS sheet on it like a few days prior to them
they
burning
went
the chemical.
back. Yeah, they went back and maybe not a few days, but maybe like a month.
The day of, or the day or two after, or something.
It was pretty close.
Or are you saying before? So that's a thing with
right before.
Okay, so
and they hadn't touched it previously for like the last 10 years.
Yeah,
and then
right.
all of a sudden.
But SDSs will set the regulation. It's basically like, a safety data sheet tells you how a product should be handled, right? So if that safety data sheet changes, then the handling procedure changes on that. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, it was rolled back prior to the accident, so it was classified as less toxic than it actually was.
So maybe then they don't need that extra worker on that super toxic train that is now less toxic.
Maybe so. And then I heard arguments that deregulation had nothing to do with it, and it was just either laziness or incompetence. Either way, I think what's probably the most important is we got to get a hold of this. We got to stop people from talking about it. We can't.
Yeah.
We got to call everything a conspiracy
Shut up.
theory. I'm sure plenty of those videos are fake. I'm sure people want to get in. This is their chance to go viral, right? So there's plenty of people doing dumb stuff that's not real, but then some of the stuff may be real. And if the actual news agencies, that's where I'm looking at it from.
Yeah.
If they don't ever go out and they don't do any journalism now. They get the press release from the train company. They get the press release from the mayor. And then that's what they spit out to the news. And that's how they do their story. Well, we talk to the experts. These are the main ones in charge. Don't ask any questions. They just take 2 or 3 press releases and write a story.
It's one of them that does that, and then everybody else
And then they
parrots
all
the
get
exact
then they all
same
parrot
one.
exactly.
Yeah.
To be fair, there was a national news reporter on site to ask questions, and he was chauffeured off the premises.
Of course he was.
So he was.
How dare you ask questions?
He was calmly handcuffed and taken off the site, or something similar to that. But there was another angle to that whole situation that had come up. It was about the unionization efforts that had happened over the last year or two. That apparently there was a whole lot of unionization effort and a lot of negotiations happening, and the government pushed. I don't know if the government pushed against it, but they maybe put a finger on the scales to cut that out.
They certainly did. So they had several
In
rail
order
companies
to
that
keep
had
the trains
partially,
going was the idea.
Yeah, they agreed. They agreed in part to kind of a temporary agreement to stop the strike from occurring, but there was still a few unions that were not signing on to it, and they still planned to strike. And eventually, the Biden administration came in, and they didn't give them what they were asking for. Paid sick leave was a big part of it. They could not have, what was it, 14 days? That's what they were asking for, paid sick leave, and they were not getting it. I also heard that most of these trains, back then, I don't know what the crew used to be like, but you had at least a handful of people running these trains. Now, these companies just want to run them with one person if they can get away with it. So that was a big part too. And the unions, the government put their finger on the scale. They definitely did.
Yeah.
Not all the unions were happy.
And from what the angle that I had heard, again, these are all angles. You can never really be too sure because nobody comes out officially and says this is why we're doing this or that or the other. But one of them was that this was starting to look incredibly bad for the administration, and it would have severely screwed up the supply chain even more if this strike had gone through in full.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a no, we can't play that game now. We need to play that game later when we've got all this other stuff figured out. And again, technology is advanced, right? We're getting to a point where we need less people for certain things. But for everything?
Well, no, I mean, what was it, a couple of weeks ago with Walmart, right? They're supposed to be pulling back on the self-checkouts because of theft. They're blaming the self-checkout. Oh, I mean, which, surprise,
Good job. Who came up with that idea?
Right.
It worked out, didn't it?
So I think there's a lot of things that, the automation scare is kind of over-embellishing. But at the same time, there's obviously going to be things down the road that, ironically, I think it's going to be programmers, especially with AI now, right? And you ask an AI program to write code for you, and it's done.
Yeah, it'll severely cut back on the number of programmers that are in existence.
Let's get back to trains.
How do we fix trains, and then we can move on? Everybody, throw up your ideas. Now, this is one idea I heard. I know it's not a good idea, but this is one of the ones that was floated out a lot. Was basically what was it? Nationalized trains. I mean, I saw it coming a mile away.
Didn't the Biden administration pass an infrastructure package? How much of that had to do with the rail industry, and how much of it was gender studies for Pakistan
Google that, bruh.
or whatever?
Google that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Whose infrastructure are we talking about here?
You know, that was a big factor. Like, we got to, I don't know if it was Matt Gaetz. There was a handful of them that were trying to put up a bill in Congress. Is like, dude, single subject bills. Quit piggybacking on
That was part
all
of the
this
speaker
crap.
fight, right?
I think so.
That was a big part of the speaker fight, was that we want single subject bills. We want to have a debate on single subjects with
Right.
everybody in the House, right?
It's too good. It's too obvious. It's like
Yeah.
it'll never happen.
Well, you can get the, Save America bill, and it
Makes
has
too much
nothing to do
sense.
with the United
Yeah.
States.
Why do any of that when you can come in for 1 week out of the year and pass an omnibus
Yeah, right.
and just be done, and then spend the rest of the year before an election, fundraising?
How do you solve the rail? Infrastructure, money definitely would help. A focus back on the rails. I mean, how about
Just safety in general, I guess, right?
Yeah.
give the workers what they're asking for? Who wants to go work on the rail industry? Also,
A lot of people,
that goes
surprisingly.
yeah,
Yeah.
They
but
make a lot of money, my friend. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
so I guess I get Travis. I say revolutionize the rail industry. More money. I hate throwing money and saying something that's a problem, but if you're going to have an infrastructure bill, not just repair the tracks, man, but this is very old technology. Telling me
Yeah.
that we can't update that and
The rest of the world has, right?
Yes.
The
Right.
majority of the world
But
uses railways.
that also goes back into what because this is a private company. What are they willing to spend to update their equipment and have they run the
Government
numbers?
So, well, you'd want to
Be
operate
throwing
like
government money at everything, bruh.
well, look, you function like an
we
electrical
throw it to
company, right?
Ukraine all the time. So
Fair enough.
That's true.
They probably got real nice trains.
Miles and miles underground. Yeah, I wonder what's going on with those right now.
What's that? Underground train?
Yeah,
Subterranean trains in
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
and Russia. I mean, they have miles and miles and miles of underground train networks.
That's the way to do it if you're always afraid of nukes.
Yeah, there's a lot of video games about that. Some good ones, man. Now, I think with the railway, from what I read, and this is several years back, the privatization of certain sections of rail caused a massive problem, because if a company owned, a stretch between Lafayette, New Orleans, and then another company owned the stretch between New Orleans and Mobile or whatever it may be, they didn't have trains that would run across, both sets of tracks. They would stop. They would only operate in that small area. So you had all of this shipping that was kind of hindered in between. But I think if you took an approach, and maybe they have since then, I don't keep up with it, but like the electrical companies or the cable companies, and have a network in place where, okay, everybody can function on these rails. These are national rails. This is considered national infrastructure.
Right.
But it's your job to maintain it and get what you will from
Well, that's
it.
and if you're going to nationalize the infrastructure fully, then you'd have to have ground rules. Like, trains cannot be X amount of miles long, and they must be manned by X amount of people that must be certified by X amount of things. And it's because, I mean, it's pretty bad. It's pretty pathetic. And I think that was one of the biggest outcries too, is that not only that there were too little people on the train, but the trains were too fucking long.
too long, yeah.
Like 3 miles long with hazardous materials on them. It's like, what are y'all doing, dude?
And then when one car tips, I mean,
The whole damn
thing,
thing. You can't
it's
stop
gone.
that, man.
Yeah.
So it's gotten out of hand. They've definitely pushed it to the point. Now let's see if they pull it back at all. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, they've definitely pushed it to that tipping point of how much can we make off of one train. And this has definitely hit the tipping point.
You know, that's shit. It's the same thing in the medical.
It's the
industry.
same thing.
I mean, it's the same
really.
thing everywhere. And I'm not. Look, I'm a capitalist, but there's a difference between capitalism and then it gets to a point to where it's not capitalism, it's corporatism. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's where profit instead of the well-being is a big issue.